Hello. Hello, everybody. Hope all is going well. I was trying to work with this music and see if we could get it to play. I tried it a different way last time. It didn't really work, but that's okay. We're gonna work through it. We'll get it right. One man show here. So hello and welcome, right? And I'd like to just start right away. Those who know me, who've seen me a few episodes, I like to just get into it right away. So my apologies not starting just immediately, but let's get into it. When a brand crisis hits and you're not sure what to do, you're going to want to think about this first. Focus on long-term goals, your long-term brand goals, and brand strategies, not just short-term fixes, right? Welcome to Strategy with Dr. M. Stolard. This series is entitled Your Brand Strategy in a Crisis, and this is episode number 6. So let's get into it. Hello, I am Dr. M. Stolard, Entrepreneurial Strategist, helping cultivate brand clarity for community organizations and those who want to create social impact. And we do this through strategy. So today's episode is about focusing on long-term brand goals and brand strategies, not just short-term fixes. And we're live on YouTube currently. So we'll see how this goes. So in the world of nonprofit organizations and community organizations, when a crisis can be particularly challenging, whether it's a financial setback or if it's a public relations crisis or even a national disaster, right? You have your leadership must balance the urgent need of the organization's long-term goals and their mission. So in order to emerge from a brand crisis a lot stronger than when you went into it, but also to become more effective, right? You as a community organization want to focus on your long-term goals rather than short-term fixes. Now, we're going to get into it. We're going to try to unpack it a little bit today. Short-term fixes are good, but it literally is just that short-term fix to Band-Aid. So allow me to give you some strategies how you as an organization can focus on long-term goals in the middle of a brand crisis. And that's really the key. In the middle of a crisis, you have a lot of stuff going on and so forth, and you have to figure out how to create tunnel vision so you can get through this particular thing that's going on with your organization. So first thing I need to advise you to do is stay true to your mission. Stay true to your mission, right? Stay true to your brand's values. This is something we discussed in the previous episode. So if you haven't checked it out, please do. When we faced with the crisis, it can be tempting to shift your organization's focus to the immediate needs of that moment, right? But that's just a Band-Aid. Sometimes a Band-Aid is needed, but it's never a long-term fix, which is why one of the things I tell you about the playbook initially is to stop all communication. Stop all communication. You can take a second, gather information so you can kind of make an effective plan. But part of that effective plan needs to take into serious consideration the long-term ramifications and the long-term goals of your organization, right? Because you can end up being in this same cycle again. However, it's critical to remember that what your organization's mission and what your true and core values are. What happened and when you first put this organization together, or when you first founded this organization, what were your goals? And so now that you're in the middle of the crisis, and it can be a little scary, a lot of things going on, you don't want to lose focus on that, right? So by staying true to your mission, you'll be able to maintain a sense of purpose and direction, and even in the middle of what may seem like a never-ending a series of crises. So number 2, you want to be transparent and communicate effectively. You heard me say this before. You want to be transparent and communicate effectively. In a brand crisis, transparency is key. Communication is our key, right? So whether it's your donors, your volunteers, your stakeholders, they're going to want to know what's going on, right? And how your organization is responding to the brand crisis at hand. And by being transparent and communicating effectively, you'll be able to maintain trust and confidence in your organization in the midst of all of this. And that's key. So remember, be transparent and communicate effectively. You don't have to rush to speak, but you have to speak immediately. Number 3, take a long-term view. Take a long-term view. While it's important to address the immediate needs of a brand crisis, it's important to take the long view. This is what we said we're going to unpack a little bit more. So consider how this brand crisis is impacting your organizational goals. And you had a strategy that you probably put in place that was supposed to get you to a certain destination or a goal or result in the years to come. So you want to make sure that that's still the case, right? You want to make sure that's still the case, that you haven't lost sight of that, okay? And then you want to develop a plan that's going to mitigate those impacts. Develop a plan that's going to mitigate those impacts. So when you take a long-term view, you're going to want to be sure that your organization emerges from the crisis stronger and more resilient than ever, right? And that should be the intention. So some quick examples of a long-term brand goals might be maybe your goal was to increase market share, right? You wanted to not just be a player, but you wanted to have a significant portion of the market share than you do now. And sometimes you have to make the hard decision to look for a new audience. I know, right? It doesn't mean you have to turn back on the audience that you currently have, but you have to make the conscious effort to look for a new audience, And so when it comes to mind is Old Spice, right? Those Old Spice, they have been around for a very, very long time, but they have also had success for a long time. But what they're finding is that, revenue was going down, market share was going down, but part of it was because, no disrespect, and I say this with the utmost respect to the individuals, but their audience were in a sense getting older, and some of them were actually passing, they were no longer here on this earth. And so, the company has to make a decision. What do you do? How do you combat that, right? Do you just say, okay, you know what? We're just no longer going to be in business. But they had to find a younger audience, a newer audience, and a younger audience. So one of the things they came up with, if you ever see one of those commercials, they had a rebranch. I think it was launched in the Super Bowl a few years back. It's a gentleman, the name is Horse. I think of his name, but he's on his horse. It's a white horse, and he's an African-American gentleman, and he's like, look at your man. Now back to me. Now back to your man. Back to me. Right? And so the commercials, it's kind of funny, but it's geared towards women, right? It's geared towards women because they have the influence over to, like, quote unquote, if your man smells good, if they tell you your man smells good, they'll be more likely to wear the Old Spice Swagger cologne and the body wash and so forth. And so that single-handed ad opened up a whole new set of audience for them, a whole new set of interest, the people who were like maybe not considering them as a brand, I have used the brand myself. I don't have any type of affiliation with the organization, but I have tried the brand myself. And so it was just something that worked well for them. And so now they've moved on to some other people. I think Terry Crews is now one of the spokesmen, was smoking for a while. And then we had, there's a gentleman, his name is Cole, his last name is Cole, he's a comedian. And there's another lady on there too. They're kind of doing these like couple counseling and different things on those commercials. So anyway, not trying to turn this into an Old Spice commercial, but this is an example of, sometimes increasing market share means also making a hard decision and looking for a new audience. Who are the people you're going to serve, And so, if you're a community organization, maybe if you're gearing towards people who are under the age of 21, and now all of one that you're serving is all the people you would normally serve are now past that age, you may have to rethink a few things, right? So another point is you want to develop a stronger connection to the individuals and the groups that truly love your brand, develop a stronger connection to the individuals and the groups that truly love your brand. So this can mean, investing in more, maybe a social media manager, doing more in social media marketing, connecting with some influencers who have different genres and so forth, and maybe investing in them and say maybe have to talk about your organization, your goals and so forth, so that people may actually see it in a different light. You know, you can come up with some customer engagement initiatives, right? To build a strong relationship between your customers and your clients, you know, the people you serve, you know, and encourage them obviously to spread the word about your brand, you know, in a positive manner. That's what you want to do. In the middle of the crisis, it's the people who truly love you, who want to serve you, are going to be your biggest allies and the biggest assets in order for you to kind of move forward. So what else we have? Another key component is you're going to invest in your brand, right? You should invest in your brand. And this is key. So when you're in the midst of a brand crisis, you know, it's very easy to neglect your organization's brand. We've kind of said that, right? It's very easy to do so. But however, when you're in the middle of a crisis, investing in your brand can be one of the most important things you can do so you can emerge even stronger, right? So what does that look like? You know, consider how your organization's brand can be impacted by the crisis, right? And you want to develop a plan to protect and strengthen it. So that's key. But by investing in your brand, you'll be able to also build trust and loyalty among your donors and your volunteers and your stakeholders, even when times is tough, right? And they'll also be able to see that you're not giving up, right? When you're investing in your organization and the donors see that and the volunteers see that, that means they're going to say, you know what, you're not just letting this give up, right? So investing in your brand, it could look like a few things. You may want to monitor, well, one, you're going to definitely want to monitor your brand's reputation, right? What are people saying? You want to engage in some type of sentiment listening or related software. There's a couple of different ones that I like that I've tested and used when it comes to what we call social listening or my area of focus, sentiment analysis. And so that's something that you want to make sure that you're doing proactively, especially when the crisis hits. You know, next you want to consider sponsoring or hosting a virtual event, right? That was very popular during the pandemic, but it doesn't mean that you can't necessarily implement that now, right? Depending on who you serve, it might be beneficial for people to try to come online and say, you know, we're just going to connect. You know, I think it's a great resource and a great tool. So consider sponsoring or hosting a virtual event, you know, depending on where the majority of your staff and your team members reside. You know, if they're not necessarily in the same state, all in the same, maybe it's scattered, then, you know, doing a quote unquote virtual meeting. And there's tons of tools out there. There's Zoom, there's Google Meet. Obviously, you can see that I'm on Zoom. But, you know, whichever one that works for your organization, right? Determine ways to invest into your employees, you know, and other stakeholders as well, right? So as much as you're serving the people that you serve, your clients and your customers and people who need your service, don't forget about your staff. Don't forget about your volunteers, you know, figure out a way to actually serve them as well. Okay. So again, community organizations, you know, must focus on long-term goals rather than short-term fixes in the midst of a crisis. And by staying true to your mission, being transparent and communicating effectively can take a long-term, by taking a long-term view and investing in your brand, you'll be able to emerge from the brand crisis a lot stronger and you'll be even more effective than ever, you know? So again, this is something that I think is super important that you want to kind of be aware of, you know? I want to thank you all for listening today. And again, focus on long-term brand goals and brand strategies, not just short-term fixes. Short-term fixes are great, but the short-term fix comes with when you're stopping the communication, right? Stop the communication altogether. But the short-term fix is just that, it's just a Band-Aid. It doesn't resolve anything. So hope you can hear this. So that's all we have for today. I am Dr. M. Stolard. Remember to keep pushing forward, drive your influence, and be intentional by using strategy. Y'all have a good day.